Okay, so the focus today is as we look at assignment number 6. The last time we were together, we started looking at the individual models of the individual parts. Okay, so we did demo some of those, and I'm happy to do that, going forward as well. But what I wanted to get into right now is putting this assembly together. Okay. So this is our final assembly drawing, but we're going to be focusing right now on just the model and putting everything in place. So I want to kind of look at how this assembly goes together. So we're familiar with the parts and what aligns. Now, I really encourage you to, if you're not following along with me right now, make sure that you do follow along with me, because there'll be some good information here along the way so that you know how to put this together, because this is kind of like the new information, if you would, that we've introduced in the last session or two. So as we look here, again, this is a drill jig fixture to put the 3 holes into a part that looks like this. Now, I had given you a handout last week, or the PDF of that handout is by assignment 6. But really, essentially, you don't have to draw this part, but this is the final part that we are creating. And what that is it's like a C channel that we would fit over the top here, and we would take our drill, it would go through the top bushings here, guide it down into the top of the part, continue to go through a second set of bushings, and then it's going to drill in the hole directly below it, underneath, and then go all the way through here and drop the part, or get the hole in the part, top and bottom. So this jig assures that each one of these holes is going to be put in the right place, and then top to bottom that it's aligned appropriately. Okay. So as we look here at the assembly and kind of going back and forth here, the parts that we're going to be looking at are the first 6 parts in my assembly right here. And these are the models that you will be creating. Okay. So we have a base plate, a locator block, bushing plate, clamp block, knurled head screw, and the clamp. So individual parts, we call them like custom parts that are going to have to be made, not purchased, that you're going to be creating. So like I said, last time we were together, we started looking at these. Now, we are going to be putting together over here. So down here is our base plate. This is part number 1. It's ballooned up here, and it corresponds to part number 1 in our bill of material. Okay. Now on that, we are then going to be attaching this locator block. Now I want to call your attention to something, because this tells me if you did it correctly or not. When we mate this, we are going to have to mate it so that the holes in the locator block here, before we even put the socket head cap screw through, we need the hole in our locator block to align with the hole in the base plates. What ends up happening, if you do it correctly, there's going to be a gap at the end here. Okay. Sometimes students want to align this back side and make it nice and even. Don't do that, because then it's not going to line up with the holes appropriately. So make sure that you're lining up the hole in the locator block with the threaded hole in the actual base here. Okay. And then stacked on top of that is going to be what we call our bushing plates. And that's where then the head of that socket head cap screw, the long one, is going to be kind of buried or countersunk down in, and then go through the locator block, and then thread down into the base plate. We also have in that bushing plate a bushing. It's going to be our first bushing at the top. Okay. And then that's going to set the drill when it goes down in. That's going to set its alignment so that it's going to actually drill the top part, go through the locator block, through the second set of drill bushings, and then it's going to drill the bottom part of that piece that we're going to be doing. We also have dowel pins. Okay, dowel pins are going to go down through here as well. If we look, oopsie, wrong direction. If we look at the top view of this, we have 3 socket head cap screws, and we have 2 dowel pins, and those are strategically placed so that we don't lose alignment. We like to set the pins like diagonal to one another so that when we pin them in place, they're going to stay where they need to be and they don't misalign over time. Okay, so that's the base plate, the locator block, and the bushing plate, and kind of their roles in what's going on here. Now, to keep that part in place, we have a clamp, okay? That's gonna push up against that part so it doesn't move once it's in place. So the clamp is one of the custom parts that we're gonna make. The clamp then is attached to the knurled head screw with a dowel pin again. So that's number 8, okay? If we look at the top here, the dowel pin I have positioned, if you would, right through the middle, and I'll show you how we put that in place. To put that part, our C part in place, there's also a little dowel pin here, so that as it pushes into place, it's going to stop on that guide, so that again, it positions the holes where it needs to from the side of that part. So there's a dowel pin right there, and that's that little hole that's in the base plate that we need to place. The knurled screw head is a threaded rod in this area that goes through what we call the clamp block. If we look at the top view, the clamp block has socketed cap screws that are counterbored down below the surface of our clamp block, and they are going to be threaded into the base plate. Our section view doesn't go through there, and that's why we don't see those, but that's okay because we're going through there and it's pretty self-explanatory. There's the 2 holes on the base plate where that goes. And then we have, I think that's it. I think we mentioned all of the parts. Over in our bill of material, as I said earlier, the first 6 parts are the ones that are going to be the ones that we model separately as individual parts. And then the last 6 parts here are going to be standard hardware. Some dowel pins, some socketed cap screws, and some drill bushings, okay? So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start the process of putting all of these parts together so that we can create just the model. All right, so the model comes first, and then we'll worry about the drawing, okay? Now, when we approach the assembly, we want to put it together like we would put together, you know, if we had the physical parts right here. So we're going to start with the base plate. Then we're going to put in the locator block. So here's the base plate, and then we're going to attach the locator block. Now, whether you would attach the locator block or the clamp block really is a horse apiece. That doesn't really matter, right? But we wouldn't start with, you know, adding our bushing plate as the first part. Again, you want to use a part that makes sense, like I said, because this is going to be sitting down on that base plate. That's the first one that we want to pull in. So after we have the locator block in, we're going to put the bushing plate in place. Then we're going to add the clamp block. We're going to put the knurled head screw in place, and then the clamp. And then after we have those 6 pieces in place, we're going to add the hardware afterwards. Okay. So that's going to be the process that we're going to take for putting the model together. So before we put the model together, you do have to have all 6 parts modeled. Okay. You can't do that on the fly. Those have to be done first. So make sure that you know where you have those saved, or you identify where you're going to save it so that you can recall them for this assembly. So I'm going to go into SolidWorks. 2 of them open for some reason. And when we get into SolidWorks, I didn't go in completely, and I wanted to kind of show you this. So there's 2 ways that we can enter in and start a new assembly. We can come up here and we can kind of go to that standard home place, and you can just click assembly. Or the other place, if you're going in, sometimes it pops up depending on what your settings are, you can pull in through the templates. And in the templates, there should be kind of that generic assembly that you can pull in as well. Okay. So we're just going to hit just one of those assemblies, one of those 2, and we're going to say, okay. Now this will look a little different from a part, as we had mentioned in the demonstration of that shaft support assembly, in that we are going to have different tabs up here on the top. Namely, the first one is in that assembly mode. Okay. Now it's asking us, what part do you want to bring in? Okay. To create. So you want to navigate to where you saved all of the models for this drill jig fixture. And so mine is already going there, and otherwise you would navigate to exactly where you're going to pull in your base plate. Now you want to make sure that you're pulling in your part file. So I'm going to pull in my base plate. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say open. And it's gonna now be on the end of my cursor. I'm gonna say, okay.
Is I supposed to have these all done by then?
You didn't have to, no. So I'm gonna demonstrate it right now, but you can't start your assembly until you do have them done, okay? So I'm gonna place my base plate just by left clicking, and now it's in place, okay? So, so there is my base plate. Now, the first part that you pull in, it will always be the one that it kind of affixes to, okay? Now, the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add my next part, and I'm gonna go up to, at the top here, insert component. Insert component, and now it's gonna, again, you need to navigate to where the next part is. So my next part is in the very same directory that I'm currently in, that I got it from, so it's gonna go back there. And now I want to identify my locator block, and I'm gonna say open. There we go, and then here's my locator block. You mean these two parts themselves? Yeah. That's okay. We'll orient them as we mate. Yeah, that's not a problem at all. So, so what I like to do here, like we did in our practice problems, is I'm going to select on each one of these, and I'm going to change the color just so that, again, it makes it obvious where one part starts and the other part begins or ends. And I'll make this one green. There we go. And colors are arbitrary. It's not really that big of a deal. Except here. Okay, so now you're going to notice that I have my part here. Now yours might come in a different orientation, and that's okay. What I do like to do is I like to get, for instance, my locator block here as close to where it needs to be as possible. So to do that, you're going to left click on the locator block on the left-hand side here in your design library. And now what's going to happen is you're going to get this, I really don't know what it's called, but it allows us to move linearly in the three directions as well as rotate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it up a little bit, and then I'm going to take this rotator and I'm going to go like this. If you need to, you can also rotate it on that rotating one. And Katie, you might have to do that if yours doesn't align hole-wise, just like that. Okay. Now, why am I doing that? Do I need to do this? Well, what I like to say is SolidWorks is still a machine. It doesn't know what I'm thinking. And I like to try to take as many decisions out of SolidWorks hands as possible. So this kind of helps us to get it there. Okay. A little bit closer. So now that I have this right about here-ish, and you could even go a little bit closer and even hover over if you wanted to. I'm going to now start my mates. So I'm going to click on mate again on that assembly tab. And I'm going to choose the items that I want to line up. Now, this is what you want to remember. We do not want the back face of this locator block to be coincident with the back face of that base plate, because again, that's not what is aligning. We showed that difference. We want these three holes to align with those three holes. Okay. So I am going to select on my first hole. I'm going to do the middle one starting that hole. And I want to select the inside surface. And I'm going to go down here and I want to select the inside surface of the bottom hole. And what happens is it makes those two concentric. Okay. And meaning that the center line of each of those is going to be aligned. So I'm going to say, okay. Now, it did pull this down onto the top of there, but if I left click on my locator block, I can still move this up and down because I have not mated it for that surface, to be coincident. So I can still do that. And it also rotates around because the only thing that I aligned was that middle center line to this middle center line. So I need to add some more mates in order for it to stop moving around. So the next mate that I'm going to do is I'm going to take either one of these diagonal holes and I'm going to then align those with the bottom. So I am going to take the inside of this hole, and again, inside, not the edge, to the inside surface of that bottom hole. And you can kind of see how it moved and it kind of straightened things out for us. And yes, I want those to be concentric. That looks good. I'm going to hit OK. So now what's happened, if I left click on this, I can only move this up and down. If I try to move back and forth to rotate it, it no longer does because now I've locked it down in that other axis, okay? So that's good. But now what I needed to do is I need the bottom. So again, I'm using my middle mouse button to rotate this around. I need the bottom of that part to be coincident with the top of my base plate. And now it's going to move those together. And I'm going to say, yep, I want those coincident. And I'm going to say, okay. And now we can see if I go in here, these are not perfectly aligned. And this lets me know that you made it on the holes being aligned as opposed to the back sides being aligned. Okay. So now if I hit okay here, it's going to go back to my design library and you'll notice that my locator block is fully defined. There's not a minus in front there. Okay. I'm going to do a file, save as, and we are going to call this the jig and fixture ASSY, and I'll call it 1 because I already have one out there. There we go. Okay. So there you have it. That's the first mate that we have here. So now the next part that I'm going to pull in here is going to be my base plate. So again, I'm going to do an insert and I'm going to go to, not base plate, I'm sorry, bushing plate. Pull my bushing plate in. My bushing plate comes in. I just need to place it, left click, and then I'm going to select on it. I'm going to change its color. We'll make it yellow. And then I'm going to reselect on it. And again, I need the angled part to be pointing out. So I'm going to rotate this around like this. I'm maybe going to pull it back over here because again, I want to kind of get it so that SolidWorks doesn't have to make too many decisions. Okay, so I'm going to left click off of that. So it's right about where I want it so I can work with it. And I'm going to click my mates. And the first thing I'm going to do is just like I did on the last one, I want my center hole to align with. Now, this is where what's nice about SolidWorks does is you'll notice that as I select one, it makes it like transparent. So I can actually go down here and select the inside surface of that middle hole. Okay, because now I can kind of see through that part, which is nice. So you can take advantage of that. So I want to go through there. Oh, come on. There we go. And now it aligned those two faces or those two surfaces to be concentric. So I'm going to say, okay. What I am going to do is I am going to take my left mouse button and just drag this up because now I want to do that very same thing for one of those other diagonal holes. Do that. And now it rotated it so that it's there. So that one looks good. So that's aligned in that direction. And you can test it out. Try to rotate it around and I can't. I can only move it up and down at this point. And then the last mate that this needs is to mate the bottom surface to the top of our locator block. So I'm going to grab the bottom surface and the top of the locator block. And now those are going to be coincident. And I'm going to say, okay. All right. So now when I hit okay here, I'm fully defined on that bushing plate as well. So I'm going to do a file, save. And now I've got those elements in place. Okay. Let's go back to our assembly drawing. So what we've done is we've put our base plate in place. We've got our locator block, and then we have our bushing plate on top. Okay. Now we're going to work on this end. I'm going to start by putting in my clamp block and then my knurled head screw and then the clamp. So again, kind of like how you would assemble it. Minus the hardware. We'll do the hardware. I always do hardware at the end. Okay. So here are the two holes that clamp block is going to go into. So I'm going to insert a component. I need the clamp block. Okay. That is here. I'm going to first select on it to change the color. We'll make this one red. Okay. And then I'm going to click on it one more time so that I can do my rotating business and moving around. So I'm going to kind of move this over here. And then I want this to rotate. Let me see. I actually want it to go this way. There. And then from the top, I want it to rotate like this. Okay. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but again, I just want to make some decisions for SolidWorks so it doesn't go too wonky. Okay, so now I'm pretty ready to, oh, I have this upside down. Look at that. There's my counter bores. I need that to be the right way. So let me go back in there. I'll reselect that. Glad I took a look. That needs to be this way because that hole looked kind of close. So that needs to be right about like that. Go a little bit further. Okay, yep. Counter bores need to be on top so that they screw down into those holes. So again, we're going to align the holes from the base plate to the clamp block. So I'm going to go to mate. And I'm going to start with the inside of this hole to mate with the inside of that hole. Okay. And I'm going to scooch this up. And then we're going to go to this side. We're going to do that very same thing. And we're going to mate. And it doesn't matter which order you do it in. You can do the base plate first and then the clamp block. And now it rotated it so that those are in alignment. And then last mate that I'm going to do is the top surface of that base plate to the bottom surface of my clamp block. And now it came down. And you're going to notice that it's all nice and lined up here. Okay. And we'll hit OK. And we'll say file save. And then we'll pull our next part in. Okay. And that's how you really kind of continue on. We do another insert. This is going to be the knurled head screw. Oopsie. Bringing that in. Again, you don't have to change the colors, but I will say it is handy and it does kind of make, oopsie, it does kind of make sense, like I said, to see the differences. Oh, we'll make this one. Make it light. We'll make it orange. There we go. Here again, if you feel like you want to pull that over, feel free to do so. Scooch it over. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, just so that it's doable. So we're going to mate. And we're going to do this surface right here, that outside thread to the inside thread here. I'm going to say okay. And then now this one, if I move this in and out, okay, it's going to allow me to move. I want to leave it like that because I still have to add my clamp to the front here. And I don't want it interfering with other parts on here. So I'm going to leave this just moving in and out. It's still aligned with the center of that threaded hole, but I want the freedom to kind of move this back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay. All right, I'm going to do a quick save. And then now, oops, sure, rebuild and save. Now we're going to put our clamp on the end here. And that'll be the last of our 6 parts to add here. So I'm going to do an insert component, go to clamp, open, and here again, I'm going to kind of move this out over here first. We're going to change the color. We'll make it blue. Okay. And then as we look here, this needs to orient so that, let's look at the thing. So that our dowel pin hole is like towards the top when it's on its side. So I'm going to click on here. I'm going to kind of rotate this around and I'm going to go like this. Right. And you'll notice that when I move this around, I want the dowel pin hole on the high side. Okay, not underneath here. Okay. All right, so now I know that this hole needs to align with this. So I'm going to click on that again. I'm going to pull this forward, pull this down, and I'll just kind of leave it right there. I'm going to go to mate, and I want that inside surface to align with the cylindrical surface here, and they are. Okay, so now that is in alignment. Now, again, right now, this is allowed to move in and out. Okay, now here is, and the other thing that's allowed to do is to rotate. So we're going to add another mate. And this is going to be more of an orientation mate, not so much a placement mate. And how we're going to do that is we are going to take, and it can either be the top surface or the bottom surface of your clamp. But right now it's kind of like in there and it's kind of hard to get at. So I'm going to take my top surface of my clamp and the top surface of my base plate. And I want those two to simply be parallel. That's all, just so that it orients my clamp so that it's like horizontal, if you would. Okay. So if I look here, it moved it a little bit, but now I can only move it back and forth. I can no longer rotate it anymore. And that's exactly what I want it to be. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is I need to look inside of that clamp because I need to align this hole with the groove. So if we look here, I need the hole, the dowel pin hole, to be close to, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we're going to see how it can nest right into the groove right there. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to SolidWorks here. Okay. And I am going to hit OK on my mate because I need to get back to this level over here. And I'm going to left click on my clamp. And when I left click on my clamp, I get all of these items up here. Okay. And one of them that I want to do is I want to change the transparency because I want to be able to see that it's there, but I want to like look inside of it. And this is just a toggle. So I'm going to left click on it. And you don't see anything happen yet, but when you left click out here, this goes transparent. Okay. So you're going to left click on the item. You're going to go up here where that little eyeball is. You're going to change transparencies. And then when you left click into the graphics or off of that, you're going to notice that it changes. Now, what this allows me to do is I am going to look down. I think is it the front view? No, I want to look down. It's going to be the bottom view. Yeah, there we go. This view right here so that I can see my hole going through and I can see the groove of my knurled head screw. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on my my clamp and I'm going to position it so it's right there. So that if I zoom in here, it's right in the middle of that groove. Okay, right there. That's all that I want. So now once it's placed there, I'm going to left click off of that clamp and I'm going to go into mate. All right. Because I don't want it to move anymore. And I want it to be relative to my knurled head screw. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom out and I am going to mate the back surface of my clamp to the end or the head side of my knurled head screw. Okay. Now it moved it. All right. I didn't want it to do that because it's assuming I want it to be coincident. I don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go down here to where the dimension is right below that lock. And it recorded for me the distance or the dimension from that surface to where the clamp lock was before it actually did the coincident. Okay, so where I would have placed it. And this is what I want to do. So you just click on that. You don't have to change this number at all. Actually, don't change it. And then you're going to hit OK. And now what happens is if I try to move this clamp, notice it now also moves the knurled head screw. Okay, and that's exactly what I want to happen because I want these two to be tied together, right? And then I'm going to hit OK. Okay. And then if you want to change that transparency here, you can. So you can go back onto the clamp and you can toggle off change transparency, left click in here, and now we've got everything in position. So each one of our 6 parts now is placed where it needs to be in the assembly. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a file save. Okay. Rebuild and save is fine. And then I'm going to stop this recording right now. And what I'm going to do is then our next recording is going to be putting all the hardware in, all those standard and using the toolbox.